Every EDC self-defense setup ultimately comes down to one simple question. What do you actually trust when things stop being comfortable and start becoming unpredictable? And that's exactly where the comparison between Temu and Amazon becomes interesting, because both platforms offer the same idea of preparedness, but they approach it from completely different philosophies. One focused on low-cost experimentation and variety, the other built around consistency, brand reliability, and real-world performance expectations. Temu has quickly become one of the fastest-growing online marketplaces in the world, known for its unbelievably low prices and massive product variety. From everyday gadgets to tactical-style EDC gear, it promises access to almost anything at a fraction of the cost you'd expect elsewhere. But the real question is simple. When the price drops this low, can you still trust what you're actually carrying when it matters most? 10. MANTIS X2 Training System. When you first hear about the MANTIS X2 training system, it doesn't really sound like your typical EDC self-defense gear item. And honestly, that's exactly what makes it interesting in this lineup. Instead of being something you carry for direct protection, this is more like a performance and skill enhancement tool that quietly changes the way you train over time. It's a compact sensor system that attaches to a standard firearm rail, and it connects directly to your smartphone through an app. Once it's set up, it tracks movement, trigger control, stability, and even micro adjustments during both dry fire and live fire sessions, turning every single repetition into data you can actually analyze. The current market price for the MANTIS X2 usually sits around $100 to $150, depending on the bundle and retailer, which actually places it right in the same budget range as many entry-level EDC tools in this Temu list. What you're really paying for here isn't physical defense capability, but information, feedback, and long-term improvement. The system uses internal motion sensors to detect even the smallest inconsistencies in your grip or trigger press, then translates that into detailed performance reports inside the app. Over time, it starts showing patterns in your shooting that most people would never notice on their own, especially under pressure or fatigue. In terms of advantages, the biggest strength of the MANTIS X2 is how fast it accelerates learning. Instead of burning through hundreds of rounds just to figure out what you're doing wrong, you get immediate feedback after every single shot. That kind of real-time correction loop is something that used to only exist in professional training environments. It's also extremely portable, lightweight, and doesn't require any special setup beyond a compatible rail and a smartphone. For someone building an EDC mindset, especially around preparedness and consistency, this kind of tool pushes you toward discipline rather than relying purely on instinct. But it's not perfect, and that's important to understand in a real-world EDC comparison. The MANTIS X2 doesn't give you any physical self-defense capability at all. If you're thinking in terms of actual emergency scenarios, this won't replace any defensive tool in your kit. It also depends heavily on your phone, battery life, and software stability, which means it introduces a layer of tech dependency that some users might not want in a high-stress environment. There's also a learning curve when it comes to interpreting the data correctly, because raw feedback doesn't automatically translate into improvement unless you actually take the time to study it. Still, in the context of this Temu EDC challenge, the MANTIS X2 stands out in a very different way. While most of the other items in this list are focused on physical presence, intimidation, or immediate utility, this one is focused entirely on building skill over time. It's the kind of tool that doesn't make you safer instantly, but theoretically makes you more capable in the long run. And that creates an interesting contrast in the overall ranking. That's because it raises a bigger question. In EDC self-defense, is it better to carry something that helps you act, or something that helps you improve the person carrying it? So, when we look at it as the number 10 item in this Temu EDC lineup, it's not here because it's weak or gimmicky, but because its purpose is fundamentally different. It doesn't belong in a fight, it belongs in the training before the fight ever happens. 9. Cold Steel Tactical Pen. At number 9 in this Temu EDC self-defense lineup, we're looking at something that, at first glance, doesn't even look like a defensive tool at all. And that's exactly where the Cold Steel Tactical Pen becomes interesting. It blends into everyday life so naturally that most people would pass it without a second thought. because from the outside, it just looks like a regular metal pen you might carry in your pocket, clipped to a shirt, or sitting inside a notebook sleeve. But underneath that familiar shape, it's designed with a very different intention in mind. In terms of pricing, the Cold Steel tactical pen usually sits around $20 to $40, depending on the seller and the specific variant, which places it in a very accessible EDC category. Unlike some of the more complex tools in this lineup, this one doesn't rely on electronics, batteries, or moving mechanisms. It's a solid-bodied aluminum or steel construction pen, typically built with a reinforced structure meant to handle pressure far beyond normal writing use. That's the key idea behind it. Dual-purpose functionality combined with structural strength. From a pure EDC perspective, one of its biggest advantages is stealth and familiarity. Nobody reacts to a pen. Nobody questions it. That makes it one of the easiest tools to carry in environments where overt tactical gear would stand out. It also performs its normal function perfectly fine as a writing instrument, which means it never feels like you're carrying something extra just for defense. It integrates directly into daily life, which is something a lot of EDC users actually prioritize more than raw capability. Another strong point is durability. Cold Steel builds their tactical pens with thick aluminum bodies and hardened tips, which means they can withstand significant force without bending or breaking under normal stress. The clip is usually reinforced as well, allowing it to stay secure in pockets or gear organizers. In theory, this gives it a level of reliability that many cheap Temu alternatives simply cannot match, especially when it comes to structural integrity under pressure. But when we move into the self-defense conversation, things need to be understood realistically. A tactical pen is not a weapon in the traditional sense. It does not provide distance, it does not create force projection, and it does not function as an intimidation tool in the same way a larger object might. Its effectiveness depends entirely on close-range access and usability, which means it's not something that replaces proper defensive awareness or situational control. In stressful conditions, fine motor skills also become a limiting factor, and that reduces its practical reliability even further. There's also a psychological aspect that gets misunderstood a lot. Many people assume a tactical pen automatically translates into safety, but in reality, it's more of a last resort improvisation tool than a primary defense solution. It can be carried everywhere, which is its biggest strength, but that same minimal footprint also means minimal physical impact compared to other dedicated EDC tools in this list. Still, in the context of this Temu EDC comparison, the Cold Steel tactical pen earns its position because of one simple idea: consistency. It is always there, it always works as a pen, and it doesn't rely on conditions, batteries, or complexity. While it may not be the most powerful or intimidating tool in the lineup, it represents something very important in everyday carry philosophy, which is accessibility without compromise on basic reliability. So, when we place it at number 9, it stands as a reminder that not every EDC tool needs to look aggressive or high-tech to have value. Sometimes, the most practical tools are the ones that quietly stay in your pocket without ever drawing attention until the exact moment you unexpectedly need them. 8. Leatherman Style PS Multi-Tool. At number 8 in this Temu EDC self-defense lineup, we're looking at something that sits in a very different category compared to the more aggressive or tactical-looking tools, and that's the Leatherman Style PS Multi-Tool. At first glance, it doesn't look intimidating at all. In fact, it looks more like a small keychain accessory than something you would associate with survival or self-defense. But that's exactly where Leatherman's design philosophy starts to show its strength, because this tool is built around everyday utility first, and defensive usefulness only as a secondary layer. In terms of pricing, the Leatherman Style PS typically ranges from around $30 to $50, depending on availability and retailer. And even though it's one of the smaller models in the Leatherman lineup, thus it still carries that same reputation for durability and engineering precision. This is a compact multi-tool designed for travel, EDC kits, and situations where weight and space are limited. It usually includes small spring-action pliers, scissors, tweezers, a nail file, and a few basic utility functions, all folded into a palm-sized frame that can easily attach to a keychain or backpack zipper. One of the strongest advantages of the Style PS is its reliability in everyday problem-solving scenarios. If you think about real-world EDC use, Most situations are not dramatic or extreme. They're simple things like cutting a loose thread, tightening something small, opening packaging, or handling minor adjustments while you're on the move. In those moments, having a compact multi-tool like this saves time and eliminates the need to carry multiple separate items. The stainless steel construction also means it holds up well over time, resisting rust and general wear, even when exposed to daily friction and moisture. Another important strength is its airline-friendly design. Unlike many multi-tools that include blades and are restricted in travel situations, the Style PS was specifically engineered to comply with travel regulations in many regions. That makes it a strong option for people who want a universal EDC tool they can carry almost anywhere without constantly worrying about restrictions. It fits naturally into pockets, travel kits, or minimal carry setups without adding noticeable bulk or weight. However, when we shift the focus towards self-defense capability, this is where expectations need to be realistic. The Leatherman Style PS is not designed as a weapon, and it does not function as one in any meaningful sense. The pliers and scissors are too small to create any real defensive advantage, and the tool lacks the structural or ergonomic design needed for force application. In a high-stress scenario, it would serve more as a utility object than anything you could rely on for protection. Even compared to something like a tactical pen or a fixed blade knife in this same lineup, its defensive role is extremely limited. There's also a trade-off that comes with its compact design. Because everything is miniaturized, the tools themselves are not as strong or capable as larger multi-tools. The scissors, while useful, are not meant for heavy cutting tasks. And the pliers are more suited for light-duty work rather than mechanical force. That's the compromise you accept when prioritizing portability over raw capability. Still, in the context of this Temu EDC lineup, the Leatherman Style PS earns its place because of balance. It doesn't try to be something it's not. It's not a weapon, it's not a heavy-duty survival tool, and it's not designed to intimidate. Instead, it quietly focuses on being useful in small but consistent ways throughout daily life. And in the world of EDC, that kind of reliability often matters more than people realize. So, when we place it at number 8, it represents the practical side of everyday carry, where usefulness in normal situations outweighs extreme tactical potential. It's the kind of tool you appreciate most, not in emergencies, but in all the small moments in between. 7. STREAMLIGHT PROTAC 1L-1 A flashlight. When people talk about everyday carry self-defense gear, they usually jump straight to knives or more aggressive tools. But in reality, one of the most underrated pieces in any setup is something far simpler, and that's light. At number 7, we're looking at the STREAMLIGHT PROTAC 1L-1AA, a compact tactical flashlight that quietly proves how important visibility becomes when everything around you turns unpredictable. This model typically sits around the $40 to $60 price range depending on the retailer, and what makes it stand out in the EDC world is not complexity, but reliability. It uses a dual fuel system, meaning it can run on either a single CR123A lithium battery or a standard AA battery. That flexibility sounds minor on paper, but in real-world situations, it becomes a huge advantage because AA batteries are still one of the most universally available power sources anywhere you go, from gas stations to emergency kits. Performance-wise, the PROTAC 1L-1 AA delivers up to around 350 lumens on its highest setting. That's not extreme by modern flashlight standards, but it's intentionally balanced for practical use. The beam pattern is designed to give you both throw and spill, which means you can see at a distance while still maintaining awareness of your immediate surroundings. In a defensive or survival context, that balance is often more valuable than raw brightness alone. One of the strongest design choices here is the simplicity of operation. The flashlight uses a tail cap switch that allows for both momentary and constant on activation. And there are no complicated mode cycles or confusing interfaces. Under stress, that matters more than people realize, because fine motor control drops when adrenaline kicks in. You don't want to think about your gear, you want it to respond instantly. In terms of durability, STREAMLIGHT builds this with aircraft-grade aluminum and an anodized finish that helps resist scratches, corrosion, and general wear from daily carry. It also carries an IPX7 water resistance rating, meaning it can handle temporary submersion without failure. For something that's meant to live in your pocket or bag every day, that level of toughness is exactly what you want from a tool you might rely on in low-light situations. Of course, it's not without trade-offs. On high output mode, battery life can drop faster than expected, especially if you're using lithium cells. And unlike some modern flashlights, there's no USB-C charging, no smart interface, and no extra consumer-friendly features. Everything here is stripped down to the essentials, which is either a limitation or a strength, depending on how you look at it. But that's exactly where the PROTAC starts to make sense in an EDC mindset. It's not trying to impress you with features you might never use. It's built around one idea. When you press the switch, it works. Every single time, without hesitation, without thinking. And that's why at number 7, the STREAMLIGHT PROTAC 1L1AA earns its place not as the most exciting tool in this lineup, but as one of the most dependable. Because sometimes the most important thing you can carry isn't something that changes the situation directly. It's something that lets you clearly see the situation in the first place. 6. TACRAY Titanium Whistle. At number 6 in this Temu EDC self-defense lineup, we're stepping into a category that most people completely overlook until they actually need it, and that is signaling and emergency awareness. The TACRAY Titanium Whistle is one of those tools that looks almost too simple to take seriously at first glance, especially when you compare it to knives, flashlights, or more aggressive-looking gear. But simplicity is exactly where its value comes from, and in an EDC system, that sometimes matters more than complexity. This item usually sells in the range of around $10 to $20 depending on the listing, which places it firmly in the budget-friendly category of this Temu lineup. It's made from titanium, yet which immediately gives it a strength and corrosion resistance advantage over cheaper aluminum or plastic alternatives. The entire design is extremely compact, often no larger than a key or small pendant, meaning it can be carried on a keychain, backpack zipper, or even hidden inside a small pocket organizer without ever being noticed or felt during daily movement. What makes this whistle interesting in an EDC context is not what it does physically, but what it does environmentally. In a real emergency scenario, whether that's getting lost outdoors, needing to signal for help, or trying to draw attention in a situation where visibility is limited, sound becomes one of the fastest ways to communicate over distance. Unlike electronic devices, it doesn't rely on batteries, connectivity, or software. It is purely mechanical, which means as long as you can exhale, it works. The performance of a titanium whistle like this is actually more effective than many people expect. Because of the material and internal chamber design, it can produce a high-frequency sound that carries significantly farther than a normal voice. That makes it especially useful in outdoor environments like hiking trails, forests, or low visibility conditions where shouting would quickly become ineffective or exhausting. It also has the advantage of being usable by anyone, regardless of physical strength or training level. One of the biggest strengths of the TACRAY whistle is reliability under failure conditions. In EDC discussions, this is often called a zero-point failure tool, meaning there are no electronic components that can break, no moving parts that can jam, and no dependency on external systems. Even after drops, exposure to water, or long-term carry, it remains functional. That level of simplicity is actually rare when you compare it to more complex tools in this lineup. However, when we shift the focus towards self-defense capability, it's important to stay realistic. This is not a tool that stops a threat or creates physical separation in any direct way. Its effectiveness depends entirely on context. If there are people nearby who can respond, it becomes valuable. If you are in an isolated environment, its usefulness drops significantly. It also doesn't create intimidation or deterrence in the traditional sense, which means its role is strictly limited to signaling and awareness. Still, in the context of this Temu EDC system, the TACRAY Titanium Whistle earns its position because it represents something most other tools in this list do not, and that is communication. While other items focus on force, utility, or control, this one focuses purely on reach, your ability to be heard when you otherwise might not be seen. So, when we place it at number 6, it stands as a reminder that in real-world preparedness, sometimes the most important tool is not the one that protects you directly, but the one that makes sure someone else knows you need help in the first place. 5. CRKT PROVOKE KARAMBIT knife. You can usually tell a lot about a tool just from the way it opens, and the CRKT PROVOKE KARAMBIT knife is one of those rare designs where the opening mechanism itself completely changes your first impression. At number 5 in this Temu EDC self-defense lineup, we're looking at something that doesn't behave like a traditional folding knife at all, and instead feels more like a mechanical concept brought into real-world form. This knife typically sits in the range of around $180 to $250, depending on the finish and retailer, placing it firmly in the premium segment of this entire lineup. It is built around CRKT's kinematic deployment system, which replaces the standard pivot hinge with a linkage-driven mechanism that allows the blade to slide forward in a controlled motion. When closed, it looks compact, almost compact enough to disappear into pocket carry without drawing attention. But when activated, the blade moves forward in a smooth, almost linear path before locking into its full karambit-style curved position. What makes the PROVOKE stand out is not just the shape of the blade, but the engineering behind how it comes into play. The motion is extremely controlled, requiring minimal repositioning of the hand during deployment. That means the transition from carry to active use is reduced to a single intentional action, which is something CRKT specifically designed for speed and efficiency. The handle includes a finger ring system, which naturally locks the user's grip into place and provides a high level of retention, especially when the knife is fully deployed. In terms of build quality, this is where the PROVOKE feels noticeably more refined than budget EDC tools. The handle is made from aluminum, giving it a balance between durability and weight reduction, while the blade is constructed from hardened stainless steel, designed to maintain edge stability over time. Everything about the structure feels purpose-driven, from the geometry of the blade to the tension in the deployment system. It doesn't feel like a novelty item. It feels like a precision tool engineered for a very specific use case. However, that specialization also comes with clear limitations. The KARAMBIT design is not intuitive for beginners, especially under stress conditions where fine motor control tends to break down. Without proper familiarity, the curved blade and ring grip system can feel unnatural or even restrictive. This is not a casual utility knife, and it is definitely not something you would rely on for everyday cutting tasks like opening packages or general EDC use. It exists in a very specific category of close-range handling tools. There is also the reality of carry context. Because of its aggressive visual profile and tactical association, it is not always a discrete EDC option, depending on environment or legal restrictions. Even when it is allowed, it tends to draw attention in a way that more neutral tools like multi-tools or pens do not. That limits its everyday versatility compared to other items in this lineup. Still, in the broader Temu EDC comparison, the CRKT PROVOKE stands out because it represents a high level of mechanical innovation. It's not trying to be universal, and it's not trying to cover multiple roles. Instead, it focuses entirely on controlled deployment and grip security in a very specific type of use scenario, and it executes that concept with impressive engineering precision. And that's exactly why, at number 5, it feels like the point in this lineup where tools stop being everyday companions and start becoming highly specialized instruments that demand understanding before use, rather than just being carried and forgotten in a pocket. 4. CROSMan SNR 357 AIR pistol. There's a very specific moment when an everyday carry item stops feeling like a gadget and starts feeling like a piece of real mechanical hardware. And the CROSMan SNR 357 air pistol hits that moment immediately the first time you pick it up. At number 4 in this Temu EDC self-defense lineup, we're dealing with something that clearly sits in a different category compared to everything we've covered so far, because it brings weight, structure, and a level of realism that smaller tools simply cannot replicate. This platform typically ranges from about $60 to $100 depending on configuration and seller, which puts it in a mid-tier budget range for EDC-related gear. The SNR 357 is built as a CO2-powered revolver-style air pistol, designed to simulate the handling characteristics of a traditional revolver, while operating on compressed CO2 cartridges. The frame usually combines metal and reinforced polymer construction, giving it enough weight to feel realistic in hand, without being classified as a firearm in most jurisdictions. That balance between realism and regulatory accessibility is exactly what defines this product category. What makes this air pistol stand out in an EDC training context is its mechanical familiarity. The cylinder rotates in a way that mimics real revolver function. The trigger pull has a deliberate resistance, and the overall balance feels intentionally designed to replicate real-world handling dynamics. It shoots steel BBs using CO2 pressure, which makes it more of a training and simulation platform than a traditional utility tool. For users who want to build muscle memory, grip discipline, and handling awareness, this kind of system offers a controlled environment to practice those fundamentals. Another noticeable advantage is the psychological realism it brings. Even though it is not a firearm, the weight, shape, and operation create a presence that feels significantly more serious than compact EDC tools like pens or flashlights. In terms of training value, that physical authenticity can help bridge the gap between theory and real-world handling. It also gives users a better understanding of how grip, stance, and movement affect control, especially when operating something that requires mechanical cycling. However, once we step outside of training scenarios, the limitations become very clear. This is not a carry-friendly EDC item in the traditional sense. Its size and shape make it impractical for daily concealed carry, and the reliance on CO2 cartridges introduces a dependency on consumables that must be maintained and replaced. That alone makes it unsuitable for minimalist EDC setups, where reliability and simplicity are the priority. There is also the fact that mechanical systems like this can lose efficiency if seals degrade or if maintenance is neglected over time. Legal and situational considerations also play a major role here. Even though it is not a firearm, its realistic appearance can create misunderstandings depending on environment and jurisdiction. That means carrying or displaying it requires a level of awareness that most other EDC tools in this list do not demand. It is not something you casually deploy or use in public-facing scenarios without consequences or context being clearly understood. Still, in this Temu EDC lineup, the CROSMan SNR357 earns its position because it occupies a very specific niche: realistic handling training. It doesn't function as a general-purpose tool, and it doesn't try to replace compact carry items. Instead, it focuses entirely on simulating mechanical familiarity, giving users a structured way to understand how larger platforms behave in controlled conditions. And that is exactly why, at number 4, it stands as a transition point in this list, where EDC stops being about convenience and starts leaning into realism, weight, and mechanical presence that demands respect, even before it is ever used. 3. STREETWISE Cell Phone Stun Gun. It only takes a second glance to realize why the STREETWISE Cell Phone Stun Gun is one of the more controversial items in this Temu EDC self-defense lineup. Because at number 3, we're dealing with something that is designed specifically around deception and concealment rather than traditional utility or training value. From the outside, it looks like an ordinary old-style mobile phone, something you might have seen years ago, which is exactly what makes it different from most tools in this list. This device usually sits in the range of around $30 to $60, depending on the seller and configuration, and it is part of a category of disguised self-defense tools that aim to blend into everyday objects. The idea behind it is simple in concept. Keep a defensive electrical device hidden inside a familiar object, so it does not attract attention. In its closed form, it resembles a basic cell phone shell, but internally it contains a high-voltage stun mechanism that is activated through a concealed switch or contact points depending on the design version. From a functional perspective, the main advantage of this type of device is concealment. In theory, it allows a user to carry a defensive tool without it being immediately recognized as such, which could be relevant in situations where visibility or perception matters. It is also compact enough to fit into a pocket, bag, or even a jacket compartment without taking up significant space. The activation method is usually designed to be quick and direct, meaning there is no complex setup or mechanical deployment process involved. However, the limitations of this kind of device become very clear when you evaluate it in a realistic EDC framework. First, reliability depends heavily on internal electronics and battery condition, which introduces a dependency that simpler mechanical tools do not have. If the battery is drained or the internal system is not functioning correctly, the the device becomes ineffective. Unlike tools such as flashlights or whistles that degrade more predictably, electronic stun devices can fail suddenly without much warning. Another important consideration is usability under stress. Devices that rely on concealed activation switches can become difficult to operate accurately when fine motor control is reduced in high-pressure situations. That means training and familiarity become essential, but even then, the margin for error is higher compared to simpler EDC tools. There is also the question of consistency, because electrical output can vary depending on charge level and environmental conditions. On top of that, legal restrictions are a major factor depending on region. Disguised stun devices are regulated differently across jurisdictions, and in some places they may fall under restricted categories due to their concealment design. That means carrying or using them requires careful understanding of local laws, which adds another layer of complexity to what is already a specialized tool. Still, in the context of this Temu EDC lineup, the STREETWISE cell phone stun gun earns its position because it represents a very specific philosophy in self-defense design. Concealment over visibility, surprise over presence. It is not a general-purpose tool, and it is not meant to replace everyday carry essentials like lights or multi-tools. Instead, it focuses entirely on the idea of hidden capability within an ordinary object. So, when we place it at number 3, it becomes clear that we are now in the final stretch of this ranking, where tools are no longer just about utility or training, but about perception, concealment, and how design itself can influence the way a tool is carried and understood before it is ever used. 2. CARDSHARP 2. At number 2 in this Temu EDC self-defense lineup, we're looking at something that almost feels like it belongs in a completely different category at first glance, because the CARDSHARP 2 is one of those tools that challenges your expectations of what carryable gear even means. Instead of looking like a traditional knife or tactical device, it presents itself as something far more discreet, almost like a flat piece of plastic you would normally ignore in your wallet or pocket. This item typically sits in the range of around $15 to $30, depending on the seller, which makes it one of the more affordable tools in this entire lineup. The design concept is centered around extreme portability, using a folding mechanism that allows the entire tool to collapse into a credit card-sized profile. When closed, it appears almost completely flat, resembling a standard card or thin plastic accessory. When deployed, it unfolds into a small utility blade system designed for light cutting tasks rather than heavy-duty use. One of the biggest advantages of the CARDSHARP 2 is its concealability. In an everyday carry context, it disappears into environments where bulkier tools would immediately be noticeable. It can fit inside a wallet slot, slip pocket, or small organizer without adding any real weight or thickness. That level of minimal presence makes it appealing for users who prioritize having a backup cutting tool without carrying something that feels like traditional gear. From a functional perspective, it performs best in simple utility scenarios. Opening packages, cutting tape, handling lightweight material tasks, or serving as a backup blade in situations where a full-size knife is not available. The folding mechanism is straightforward, and the stainless steel blade provides basic cutting capability when properly deployed. In terms of design philosophy, it is very much focused on convenience over strength, which is an important distinction in this category. However, the limitations become very noticeable when you evaluate it beyond basic utility use. The thin structure means it does not offer the same stability or durability as fixed blade or even traditional folding knives. Under pressure or heavy force, the rigidity is significantly lower, which restricts its use in more demanding situations. It is not designed for leverage-heavy tasks, and over time, the folding mechanism can also introduce wear depending on usage intensity. Another key point is deployment practicality. While it looks extremely compact and clever in design, unfolding it still requires deliberate movement and attention. In high-stress situations, anything that requires multiple steps or fine motor coordination can become less reliable compared to simpler, single-motion tools. That makes it more of a convenience blade than a true defensive instrument in real-world scenarios. There is also the perception factor. Even though it is designed to be discreet, once deployed it becomes visually obvious as a blade, which means it does not maintain any form of tactical ambiguity during use. That limits its role strictly to utility, rather than any form of situational deterrence or psychological presence. Still, in the context of this Temu EDC lineup, the CARDSHARP 2 earns its position because it represents one of the most extreme examples of portability-focused design. It is not trying to be strong, aggressive, or multifunctional. Instead, it commits fully to the idea of being present without being noticed. And that alone gives it a unique role in everyday carry philosophy. So, when we place it at number 2, it stands as the final step before the top position, representing the idea that in EDC design, sometimes the most interesting tools are not the strongest or the most complex, but the ones that almost disappear until the exact moment they are needed. 1. ELIDE Fireball. When you reach the number 1 spot in this Temu EDC self-defense lineup, you probably expect something that looks like a weapon, a tool, or at least something you can actively carry and deploy. But the ELIDE Fireball completely breaks that expectation from the very beginning, because this is not a tool for confrontation at all. It is a passive emergency safety device designed for a completely different kind of scenario. This item usually sits in the range of around $20 to $40, depending on the seller and packaging, and unlike everything else in this list, it is not designed to be carried on your person as part of a daily EDC setup. Instead, it is intended for fixed placement in environments where fire risk or emergency response speed matters. The device itself is a lightweight spherical capsule filled with fire extinguishing powder, designed to activate automatically when exposed to high temperatures or direct flames. The concept behind the ELIDE Fireball is extremely straightforward. When a fire reaches a certain intensity level, typically around activation heat thresholds near the ignition point, the outer casing ruptures and disperses extinguishing powder across the surrounding area. This creates an immediate suppression effect that can slow or stop small fires before they escalate. It is designed to be mounted or placed in strategic locations such as homes, vehicles, storage areas, or enclosed spaces, where quick response might not always be possible. One of the strongest advantages of this device is its complete independence from human reaction time. It's unlike traditional fire extinguishers that require you to physically locate, aim, and operate them. The ELIDE Fireball is designed to activate automatically. That means in scenarios where people are not present, unaware, or unable to respond quickly, the device still functions as a passive safety layer. It is also extremely lightweight and requires no training, no maintenance beyond placement, and no mechanical operation from the user. From a design perspective, its simplicity is its defining feature. There are no switches, no batteries, no electronic components, and no moving parts that require calibration. That makes it highly reliable in long-term stationary use, especially in environments where equipment maintenance might be inconsistent. It is also visually distinct, often brightly colored, which helps with visibility and placement awareness in emergency setups. However, when you evaluate it within a strict EDC self-defense framework, its limitations become immediately obvious. This is not a personal carry item, and it does not provide any form of active defense capability. It cannot be used in motion, it does not respond to dynamic threats, and it does not function in interpersonal scenarios. Its role is entirely environmental and passive, meaning it only becomes relevant under very specific conditions involving fire and heat exposure. There is also a common misunderstanding about its purpose. Some people mistakenly associate it with general safety or defensive utility. But in reality, it is strictly a fire suppression device. It does not replace portable extinguishers for active response. And it is not designed for human-controlled intervention. Its effectiveness is tied entirely to placement strategy and environmental readiness rather than user interaction. Still, in the context of this Temu EDC ranking, the ELIDE Fireball earns the number 1 position not because it is the most aggressive or tactical item, but because it represents the final layer of preparedness in a completely different way. While every other tool in this list focuses on carry, action, or training, this one focuses on prevention and automatic response when human action is no longer possible. So, when we close this entire lineup at number 1, the ELIDE Fireball stands as a reminder that true preparedness is not only about what you can carry on your body, but also about what you can place around you to protect spaces, all even when you are not there to react at all. Amazon. Amazon is one of those platforms that most people already trust before they even click anything, because unlike fast-moving bargain marketplaces, It has built its reputation over decades around consistency, verified brands, and a massive review ecosystem that filters out a lot of the uncertainty buyers usually face online. And when it comes to EDC self-defense gear, that difference becomes even more noticeable, because here you are not just buying cheap tools to experiment with, you are usually investing in equipment that is expected to work the same way every single time you pick it up. 10. JAGDKOMMANDO TRI-DAGGER. At number 10 in the Amazon EDC self-defense lineup, we're starting with one of the most visually aggressive and mechanically unusual tools on this entire list, and the JAGDKOMMANDO TRI-DAGGER immediately sets a very different tone compared to the more utility-focused gear that follows. This is not something that blends into everyday life quietly, and it's definitely not designed with subtlety in mind. From the moment you see it, you understand it belongs to a very specific category of extreme tactical design rather than general-purpose carry. The JAGDKOMMANDO TRI-DAGGER typically sits in the range of around $200 to $350, depending on the manufacturer, finish, and availability, which places it firmly in the premium tactical niche. It is constructed from a single piece of high-grade stainless steel or titanium in some variants, machined into a 3-edged triangular blade structure. Unlike traditional knives that rely on a single cutting edge, this design uses a geometric tri-blade form that creates a rigid, symmetrical profile intended for structural strength and penetration-focused engineering rather than utility-cutting tasks. What makes this tool stand out in discussions is not just its appearance, but the philosophy behind its construction. It is a monolithic design, meaning there are no folding parts, no joints, and no moving mechanisms. Everything is fixed, solid, and built as one continuous structure. That gives it a level of durability that is very different from folding knives or multi-tools. Because there are no pivot points that can loosen or fail over time. In EDC terms, that translates into absolute structural consistency, regardless of environment or usage frequency. From a handling perspective, the triangular grip and blade geometry create a very distinctive feel in hand. It is not designed for general utility tasks like opening boxes or daily cutting chores. Instead, it is engineered around control and rigidity in close-range scenarios. The finger positioning and balance point are intentionally structured to lock the hand into a fixed orientation, which is part of why it is often categorized as a specialized tactical instrument rather than a conventional knife. However, when you evaluate it from a practical everyday carry standpoint, the limitations are just as important as the engineering. The aggressive design means it is not discreet, and it immediately stands out in any environment where visible tools are restricted or socially sensitive. It is also not versatile in daily tasks, because the geometry and structure make it unsuitable for basic utility work compared to standard folding knives or multi-tools. That lack of flexibility is a key trade-off in its design philosophy. Another important consideration is carry practicality. Because it is a rigid, fixed structure, it does not collapse or reduce in size, which means it requires dedicated storage or sheath carry. That makes it less convenient for minimalist EDC setups, where pocket space and quick accessibility are important. It also demands a higher level of responsibility from the user, because its design leaves very little room for casual or improvised use. Still, in the context of this Amazon EDC lineup, the JAGDKOMMANDO TRI-DAGGER earns its position because it represents the extreme end of tactical engineering. It is not about everyday convenience, and it is not about multi-purpose functionality. Instead, it is about structural design taken to its most rigid and uncompromising form, where every element is optimized for a very narrow but intentional use case. So, when we place it at number 10, it stands as the opening statement for the Amazon side of this comparison, showing that this lineup is not about novelty or experimentation, but about highly specialized tools that prioritize purpose-built design over everyday flexibility, even if that makes them less adaptable in general carry situations. 9. MAXPEDITION Fatty Pocket Organizer. If you've ever tried building a proper EDC kit and realized halfway through that everything just turns into a messy pocket dump, then the MAXPEDITION Fatty Pocket Organizer is basically the kind of product that quietly fixes that problem without looking like it's doing anything special at first glance. At number 9 in this Amazon EDC self-defense lineup, we're not talking about a weapon or a tool you actively use, but something that controls how every other item in your setup behaves. The Fatty Pocket Organizer usually falls in the range of about $40 to $70, depending on colorway and seller, and it is built as a compact tactical storage pouch designed to consolidate multiple small EDC items into a structured system. The exterior is made from heavy-duty nylon, often referred to as ballistic-grade material, with reinforced stitching and industrial zippers that are designed to survive constant opening, closing, and environmental stress. It also features external MOLLE webbing, which allows it to attach to backpacks, belts, or modular carry systems without losing shape or stability. Inside, the design is where the value actually shows up. Instead of being a simple pouch, it's divided into layered compartments, elastic retention bands, and mesh pockets that force your gear into a predictable layout. That means your flashlight always goes in one place, your multi-tool stays in another, and smaller accessories like pens or whistles have their own dedicated slots. In real-world EDC use, that structure reduces friction dramatically. Yes, because you're no longer searching for items under pressure or digging through loose pockets. One of the biggest strengths of the Fatty is system organization. Most people underestimate how much time is lost simply trying to locate gear in a bag or pocket setup, especially in low-light or high-stress situations. This organizer removes that uncertainty by turning your carry into a repeatable system. You open it, and everything is exactly where it should be, every single time. That consistency becomes more important the more complex your EDC loadout becomes. Durability is another area where MAXPEDITION has built its reputation. The stitching is reinforced, the fabric is abrasion-resistant, and the zippers are designed for long-term mechanical stress rather than casual use. It's the kind of gear that doesn't just survive daily carry. It's built for environments where gear is constantly being handled, compressed, and exposed to friction over time. But at the same time, it's important to understand what this product is not. The Fatty Pocket Organizer does not add any direct capability to your EDC by itself. If you don't put meaningful tools inside it, it becomes nothing more than an empty shell. Its entire value depends on how intentional you are about building your loadout around it. That means it rewards planning, but it doesn't compensate for lack of it. There's also the trade-off of bulk. Even though it's compact compared to a full backpack, it still adds structure and thickness to your carry system. For people who prefer ultra-minimal EDC setups, this might feel like unnecessary overhead. But for users who carry multiple tools regularly, that added structure becomes a major advantage rather than a drawback. Still, in this Amazon EDC lineup, the MAXPEDITION Fatty earns its position because it represents something most people overlook completely: control over chaos. It doesn't make your gear stronger, but it makes your gear usable when it matters most. And that distinction is what separates casual carry from a real system. So, at number 9, this isn't about what you carry in your hand, it's about whether you can actually find it in the moment you need it without thinking twice. 8. G-SHOCK GPR-H1000 RANGEMAN. There are very few pieces of EDC gear that quietly redefine what preparedness actually looks like just by sitting on your wrist. But the Casio G-SHOCK GPR-H1000 RANGEMAN is one of those rare exceptions. Because at number 8 in this Amazon EDC self-defense lineup, we're no longer talking about tools you carry in your pocket or bag. We're talking about something that becomes part of your body movement throughout the entire day. This model typically sits in the range of around $400 to $550, depending on retailer and availability, placing it firmly in the premium outdoor and tactical smartwatch category. Unlike traditional watches, the RANGEMAN is built as a full survival instrument, integrating GPS navigation, multi-band atomic timekeeping, its solar-assisted charging, and a full suite of environmental sensors. That includes altitude tracking, barometric pressure readings, temperature monitoring, and digital compass functionality, all packed into a shock-resistant G-SHOCK frame designed to survive extreme physical conditions. What makes the GPR-H1000 particularly relevant in an EDC context is not just the number of features it offers, but how seamlessly those features integrate into real-world movement. The GPS tracking system allows for route mapping and location awareness, while the sensor suite gives you environmental feedback that can be critical in outdoor or survival scenarios. In other words, it's not just telling you the time, it's constantly feeding you data about your surroundings without requiring active input. That's one of the strongest advantages of this watch is its independence from constant charging. The solar-assisted power system reduces dependency on external charging cycles, which is a major advantage in long-duration outdoor use cases. Combined with Casio's reputation for durability, the RANGEMAN is built to handle impact, vibration, water exposure, and temperature variation without losing core functionality. That level of resilience is what makes it suitable for tactical, outdoor, and emergency preparedness environments. Another important aspect is how this device enhances decision-making under pressure. In EDC scenarios, situational awareness is often the difference between reacting correctly or reacting late. Having real-time environmental data on your wrist means you can make faster judgments about terrain, weather changes, or navigation choices without stopping to pull out separate devices. That kind of integration reduces cognitive load, which becomes critical when stress levels rise. However, despite its impressive capability set, the RANGEMAN is not without limitations. The interface is feature-rich, which means there is a learning curve involved before you can fully utilize everything it offers. It is not a pick-up and instantly master type of device. Some users may also find the interface complexity unnecessary for basic daily wear, especially if they only need simple timekeeping and basic alerts. And like all electronic systems, it still depends on internal battery health and sensor calibration over long periods of use. There is also the factor of size and presence. This is not a subtle watch, and it does not disappear on the wrist the way minimalist timepieces do. It carries a bold, technical aesthetic that clearly signals function over fashion, which may not fit every environment or personal style preference. In EDC terms, that means it prioritizes capability over discretion. Still, in the context of this Amazon EDC lineup, the G-SHOCK GPR-H1000 RANGEMAN earns its position because it represents something very few items in this entire list can offer: continuous awareness without interruption. It doesn't wait to be deployed like a tool in your pocket. It is already active the moment you put it on. So, at number 8, this isn't just a watch you wear for timekeeping, it becomes a constant layer of information sitting on your wrist, all quietly shaping how you understand every environment you move through without ever needing to be taken out or activated. 7. HOGUE AXF03 KARAMBIT Knife. The first impression you get when handling the HOGUE AXF03 KARAMBIT knife is that this is not a tool designed to blend into everyday life. And at number 7 in this Amazon EDC self-defense lineup, we're stepping into a category where design choices feel very intentional, very controlled, and very focused on a specific kind of close-quarters utility rather than general-purpose carry. This model typically ranges from around $120 to $180 depending on retailer and handle configuration, placing it in the mid to premium fixed blade category. Unlike folding knives, the EX-F03 is a fixed blade design, meaning there are no moving parts, no pivot points, and no folding mechanisms. The blade is permanently exposed and secured in a compact sheath system, which immediately improves structural reliability compared to folding alternatives. The KARAMBIT-inspired curvature gives it a distinct handling profile, optimized for retention and controlled grip positioning. The construction is one of the strongest points of this knife. HOGUE is known for precision manufacturing, and the EX-F03 reflects that with a solid steel blade paired with a G10 or polymer handle depending on version. The texture of the grip is designed to maintain control even in wet or high-friction conditions. And the finger ring at the base of the handle allows for a secure retention style that reduces the chance of slippage during use. Everything about the design feels focused on stability and predictability rather than versatility. In terms of EDC relevance, this is a tool that prioritizes readiness over convenience. Because it is a fixed blade, there is no deployment delay like you would see in folding systems. It is already in its functional state the moment it is drawn from the sheath. That makes it mechanically simpler and more reliable under stress conditions where hesitation or fine motor delays can become a disadvantage. The sheath system is also designed for secure carry, often allowing belt or gear mounting depending on setup. One of the key strengths of the EX-F03 is consistency under load. Fixed blade construction inherently removes one of the biggest failure points in knife design, which is the pivot mechanism. That means there is less risk of mechanical failure over time, and the blade alignment remains stable even after repeated use. For users who value reliability in harsh conditions, that structural simplicity becomes a major advantage. However, the limitations are just as clear when viewed through a practical everyday carry lens. This is not a discrete tool. Its fixed blade nature requires external carry solutions, and it cannot be easily concealed in a pocket like smaller folding knives. That alone makes it less adaptable in environments where subtlety or minimal presence is important. It also requires more awareness in handling and storage compared to compact EDC tools. Another consideration is specialization. The KARAMBIT geometry is optimized for a specific grip style and handling orientation, which means it is not as universally adaptable as straight blade utility knives. While it excels in retention and control-focused design, it is not the most efficient option for general cutting tasks in daily environments. That specialization makes it more of a dedicated tool than a multi-role EDC option. Still, in the context of this Amazon EDC lineup, the HOGUE EX-F03 earns its position because it represents mechanical certainty. It is a tool stripped down to its most direct form, where structure, grip, and blade integrity take priority over portability or everyday convenience. So, when we place it at number 7, it becomes the point in the lineup where design stops trying to be flexible and instead commits fully to stability, control, and the kind of reliability that only a fixed structure can provide when everything else becomes unpredictable. 6. NOCRY Guard Knee Pads. Sometimes the most important EDC gear isn't something you hold in your hand or wear on your belt. And at number 6, in this Amazon self-defense and preparedness lineup, the NOCRY Guard knee pads represent exactly that kind of overlooked category where protection is not about offense or utility, but about how your body interacts with the environment when things go wrong. These knee pads typically sit in the range of around $20 to $40 depending on version and retailer, making them one of the more affordable items in the Amazon tactical and outdoor gear space. They are designed using a combination of high-density foam padding and hard outer shell protection, usually supported by adjustable elastic straps that secure the pads around the knee joint. The construction is focused on distributing impact force while maintaining enough flexibility for movement during walking, kneeling, or low-position tasks. The core purpose of this equipment is simple but very situational. In EDC or tactical environments, users often find themselves in positions where kneeling on rough terrain, unstable ground, or debris-filled environments becomes necessary. That could be during outdoor survival situations, emergency response scenarios, construction-related movement, or even tactical positioning training. In those moments, joint protection becomes more than comfort. It becomes a way to maintain mobility over extended periods without injury buildup. One of the strongest advantages of the NOCRY Guard system is how it balances protection with mobility. Unlike bulkier military-grade knee protection, these pads are designed to remain relatively lightweight and flexible, which allows users to move naturally without feeling restricted. The straps are adjustable, meaning they can be adapted to different leg sizes and worn over clothing or tactical pants without requiring a specialized uniform setup. That makes them versatile in both professional and casual outdoor use cases. Durability is another important factor here. The outer shell is designed to absorb impact from direct contact with hard surfaces, while the inner foam layer helps reduce pressure over time. This combination is particularly useful in environments where repeated kneeling or sudden ground contact is expected. The materials are also resistant to basic environmental wear, meaning they can handle dirt, moisture, and friction without quickly breaking down under normal usage conditions. However, when evaluated in a strict self-defense context, the limitations are immediately obvious. Knee pads do not provide any direct protective capability against threats or physical confrontation. They do not contribute to offense, deterrence, or situational control in a direct sense. Instead, their role is entirely passive, focusing on injury prevention rather than engagement. That means their value only becomes visible in extended movement scenarios, not in immediate defensive situations. There is also the comfort factor to consider. While they are designed to be lightweight, prolonged wear can still become noticeable depending on activity level and temperature conditions. Like most wearable protective gear, they require adjustment and occasional repositioning to maintain comfort during long use periods. They are not something you activate, but rather something you continuously adapt to while moving. Still, in the context of this Amazon EDC lineup, the NOCRY guard knee pads earn their position because they highlight a different kind of readiness, one that is not focused on confrontation, but on sustainability of movement. They remind us that preparedness is not only about what you carry in your hands, but also about how long your body can stay functional in demanding conditions. So at number 6, this item quietly shifts the focus away from tools of action and toward the physical endurance of the user, because in real-world scenarios, staying able to move can matter just as much as anything you might carry with you. 5. LEATHERMAN SKELETOOL CX. If there is one category in EDC that almost everyone eventually respects after enough real-world use, it's the multi-tool, and at number 5 in this Amazon self-defense and preparedness lineup, the LEATHERMAN SKELETOOL CX stands out as a very refined example of how minimalism and functionality can actually meet in the middle without turning into unnecessary bulk or complexity. This model usually sits in the range of around $80 to $110, depending on retailer and availability, placing it in the mid to premium EDC category for multi-tools. Unlike heavier full-size platforms, the SKELETOOL CX is designed with a stripped-down philosophy, focusing only on the most frequently used functions. It typically includes a combination of pliers, a folding knife blade, a bit driver system, and a removable pocket clip and a carabiner-style attachment point that also doubles as a bottle opener. The entire frame is built using stainless steel with carbon fiber reinforced panels on some variants, reducing weight while maintaining structural rigidity. What makes this tool particularly relevant in an everyday carry context is how intentionally it removes unnecessary components. Instead of trying to be a full workshop in your pocket, it focuses on speed of access and frequency of use. The pliers are designed for grip and manipulation tasks, the blade is sized for general cutting work, and the bit driver allows quick adjustments for common hardware situations. In practice, this means it covers the majority of small, unpredictable tasks that appear throughout daily environments without requiring a dedicated tool set. One of the strongest advantages of the SKELETOOL CX is its balance between weight and capability. At roughly 5 ounces or less, depending on configuration, it is light enough to carry every day without discomfort, yet still strong enough to handle mechanical tasks that go beyond basic utility tools. The carbon fiber handle inserts reduce overall mass while still maintaining enough structural support for repeated use. That balance is a big reason why it has become one of the most popular minimalist multi-tools in the EDC community. Another important aspect is usability. LEATHERMAN designs this tool with one-handed accessibility in mind, meaning key functions like the blade and pliers can be deployed without complicated unfolding sequences. In real-world scenarios where speed and simplicity matter more than having multiple options, that streamlined design becomes a clear advantage. The locking mechanism on the blade also adds a layer of safety during use, ensuring stability under pressure. However, this minimal approach also comes with trade-offs. By removing many traditional multi-tool features, the SKELETOOL CX sacrifices versatility. There are no scissors, no saw, no advanced tool selection, and no heavy-duty mechanical leverage capabilities found in larger LEATHERMAN models. That means users who expect a full survival toolkit may find it limited in scope. It is intentionally designed for light to moderate tasks rather than heavy field operations. There is also the consideration of specialization versus redundancy. While it excels at everyday tasks, it does not replace a full toolkit in emergency or professional environments. It is a companion tool, not a standalone solution for complex mechanical work. That distinction is important in EDC planning because it defines how and when this tool should be relied upon. Still, in the context of this Amazon EDC lineup, the LEATHERMAN SKELETOOL CX earns its position because it represents disciplined design. Instead of adding more, it focuses on removing everything unnecessary until only the most useful functions remain. And that kind of intentional simplicity often performs better in real-world carry than overloaded alternatives. So, at number 5, this tool closes a very specific gap in the lineup because it reminds us that true efficiency in everyday carry is not about how much you can bring with you, but about how little you actually need to bring in order to stay capable when the moment arrives. 4. Atomic Bear SWAT Tactical Knife. There's a very specific category of EDC gear that sits right in the middle between affordability and tactical styling, and at number 4 in this Amazon self-defense lineup, the Atomic Bear SWAT tactical knife represents exactly that space where design, accessibility, and practical entry-level use all overlap without pushing into premium territory. This knife typically sells in the range of around $20 to $40, depending on bundle options and retailer listings, making it one of the more budget-friendly tactical-style knives in the Amazon ecosystem. It is designed as a folding knife with assisted opening functionality, meaning the blade can be deployed quickly through a spring-assisted mechanism once the user initiates the opening motion. The handle is usually constructed from reinforced stainless steel or aluminum alloy, combined with textured grip inserts, giving it a more aggressive tactical appearance while maintaining lightweight portability. What makes this knife stand out in the EDC space is its focus on accessibility. Unlike higher-end knives that require familiarity or technique, the Atomic Bear SWAT knife is designed to be intuitive for beginners. The assisted opening system reduces deployment effort, allowing the blade to be accessed quickly with one hand. In everyday carry scenarios, that kind of simplicity is often what users prioritize, especially when they are building their first EDC kit and want something functional without a steep learning curve. The blade itself is generally made from stainless steel with a partially serrated edge depending on version, which gives it versatility for basic cutting tasks such as rope, packaging, or lightweight materials. The locking mechanism is designed to keep the blade stable during use, preventing accidental closure during standard pressure applications. In terms of real-world usability, it performs best in utility-focused situations rather than heavy-duty mechanical tasks. One of the strongest advantages of the Atomic Bear knife is its balance between price and functionality. It provides a tactical aesthetic combined with usable everyday features at a cost that is significantly lower than premium knife brands. For users who want a visual and functional entry point into EDC knives without investing heavily, it offers a practical starting platform. It also includes a pocket clip, which makes it easy to carry in jeans, jackets, or tactical pants without requiring additional storage accessories. However, the limitations become clear when compared to higher-tier knives in this lineup. The materials and construction, while functional, are not designed for extreme durability or long-term professional use under heavy stress. The assisted mechanism, while convenient, introduces a mechanical component that can wear over time depending on usage intensity. It also lacks the refinement and precision engineering found in brands like BENCHMADE or HOGUE, which operate in a higher performance category. There is also the consideration of consistency. Entry-level tactical knives often vary slightly in fit and finish depending on production batch, which means performance can feel less uniform compared to premium-grade tools. While it performs adequately for general EDC tasks, it is not designed to be a high-reliability tool for demanding environments or repeated heavy-duty use. Still, in the context of this Amazon EDC lineup, the Atomic Bear SWAT tactical knife earns its position because it serves as a gateway tool. It introduces users to the concept of carrying a functional blade in everyday life without overwhelming them with cost or complexity, making it an accessible step into the broader tactical EDC world. So, at number 4, this knife stands as the point in the lineup where practicality meets entry-level tactical design, offering just enough capability to be useful while still remaining approachable for everyday users who are building their first real carry setup. 3. BENCHMADE Fixed BUSHCRAFTER 162. There are certain tools in the EDC world that immediately signal a shift in seriousness the moment they enter the conversation. And at number 3 in this Amazon self-defense and preparedness lineup, the BENCHMADE Fixed BUSHCRAFTER 162 is exactly that kind of tool because it is built not for convenience or aesthetics, but for consistent performance in demanding outdoor and survival-oriented environments. This knife typically sits in the range of around $180 to $250, depending on retailer and handle variation, placing it firmly in the premium fixed blade category. Unlike folding knives, the BUSHCRAFTER 162 uses a full fixed blade construction, meaning the blade and tang are a single continuous piece of steel that extends through the handle for maximum structural integrity. The blade itself is made from high-quality stainless steel, designed to maintain edge retention while resisting corrosion in outdoor conditions. and the handle is usually constructed from durable composite materials such as G10 or stabilized polymer for grip stability in wet or dry environments. What sets this knife apart is its clear focus on utility in outdoor and survival contexts rather than tactical styling. The blade geometry is optimized for controlled slicing, carving, and general bushcraft tasks, making it suitable for wood processing, shelter preparation, and food-related tasks in field environments. The fixed blade design eliminates the mechanical failure points found in folding knives, which means there is no pivot, no locking mechanism, and no deployment delay. It is always in its ready state once drawn from the sheath. One of the strongest advantages of the BUSHCRAFTER 162 is reliability under repeated stress. BENCHMADE is known for precision manufacturing, and this model reflects that reputation with tight tolerances and consistent structural performance. The balance point of the knife is designed to give users control during extended use, reducing fatigue during repetitive cutting or carving tasks. The sheath system is also engineered for secure retention, allowing safe carry on belts or gear setups while keeping the blade easily accessible when needed. Another important strength is its versatility in outdoor environments. While it is not a multi-tool, the BUSHCRAFTER 162 handles a wide range of essential field tasks with efficiency. From preparing tinder and carving wood to processing materials for shelter construction, it performs consistently without requiring adjustment or mechanical setup. That simplicity is part of what makes fixed blade designs so valued in survival-focused EDC setups. However, the trade-offs are just as important to understand. This is not a compact or discrete carry item. Its fixed blade nature requires external carry solutions such as belt sheaths or gear mounting systems, which makes it less suitable for minimalist or urban EDC setups. It also does not offer the versatility of multi-tools, meaning it is specialized rather than universal in function. For users who prioritize compact carry, this level of commitment may feel excessive. There is also the consideration of environment. While it excels in outdoor and survival contexts, it is not designed for everyday urban utility tasks like opening packages or light cutting work. Carrying it in daily environments may feel impractical depending on local norms and expectations, which limits its general purpose applicability compared to smaller EDC tools. Still, in the context of this Amazon EDC lineup, the BENCHMADE fixed BUSHCRAFTER 162 earns its position because it represents uncompromising structural reliability. It is a tool built with a singular focus on performance in demanding environments where failure is not an option, and simplicity becomes a strength rather than a limitation. So at number 3, it stands as the moment in this ranking where EDC transitions fully into field-grade preparedness, where tools are no longer about convenience in daily life, but about dependability when conditions become physically demanding and unpredictable. 2. UZI Tactical Self-Defense Umbrella. It's not often that an everyday object gets reimagined in a way that completely changes how you look at carry items, but at number 2 in this Amazon EDC self-defense lineup, the UZI Tactical Self-Defense Umbrella does exactly that, because from a distance it looks completely ordinary, yet its internal construction tells a very different story about intent and design philosophy. This umbrella typically sits in the range of around $40 to $90, depending on retailer and version, and it is built around a reinforced tactical framework rather than a standard consumer umbrella structure. The shaft is usually constructed from high-strength fiberglass or reinforced polymer composites, paired with a dense, impact-resistant handle designed for durability under stress. Next, unlike conventional umbrellas that prioritize lightweight materials and casual use, this model is engineered to maintain structural integrity under forceful conditions, which is where its tactical classification comes from. What makes this item interesting in an EDC context is its dual identity. On the surface, it functions exactly like a normal umbrella, providing weather protection and everyday usability without drawing attention. But internally, the reinforcement of the shaft and handle transforms it into a rigid impact tool when deployed in physical scenarios. That combination of everyday disguise and structural reinforcement is what defines its appeal in preparedness-focused discussions. One of the strongest advantages of the UZI Tactical Umbrella is its accessibility in daily environments. Unlike knives or other restricted tools, An umbrella is universally accepted in almost every setting, whether indoors, outdoors, urban, or travel-related. That means it can be carried without raising concern or requiring special storage considerations. In EDC terms, that level of social neutrality is extremely valuable because it allows the user to maintain a prepared posture without altering behavior or appearance. Another important strength is durability. The reinforced shaft design allows it to withstand significantly more stress than standard umbrellas, especially in windy or physically demanding conditions. The handle is also designed for secure grip retention, which improves control during use in adverse weather, while it is still fundamentally a weather protection tool. The added structural reinforcement means it does not fail as easily as consumer-grade alternatives under pressure. However, the limitations are equally important to understand. Despite its tactical branding, this is not a dedicated defensive tool in the traditional sense. Its effectiveness depends heavily on context, proximity, and user capability, and it does not provide specialized functionality beyond structural impact resistance. It is also bulkier than compact travel umbrellas, which means it may not fit minimalist carry preferences where size and weight are critical factors. There is also the psychological aspect of overestimation. Because it is labeled as tactical, some users may assume it performs at a level comparable to dedicated defensive tools, but in reality, it remains an adaptation of a common everyday object rather than a purpose-built system. That distinction is important when evaluating its role within a structured EDC setup. Still, in the context of this Amazon EDC lineup, the UZI Tactical Self-Defense Umbrella earns its position because it represents the concept of invisible preparedness. It blends into everyday life seamlessly, while carrying structural enhancements that are not immediately visible, making it one of the most socially adaptable items in the entire list. So, at number 2, it stands as a reminder that sometimes the most effective preparedness tools are not the ones that look tactical, but the ones that never need to announce their purpose in the first place. 1. 5.11 Rush 24 2.0 Tactical Backpack. When you reach the top of an EDC self-defense lineup like this, most people expect a weapon or a single standout tool, but at number 1 in the Amazon EDC system, the 511 Rush 24 2.0 Tactical Backpack takes a completely different approach because instead of being a single-purpose item, it becomes the structure that holds everything else together. This backpack typically sits in the range of around $120 to $160, depending on color and retailer, placing it in the mid to premium tactical gear category. It is built using high-density 1050D nylon, a material known for abrasion resistance and long-term durability under heavy use. The bag features a 24-hour carry capacity design, which is where the Rush 24 name comes from. Meaning, it is optimized for a full day's worth of EDC, survival gear, or field equipment without needing to be replaced or reorganized constantly. What immediately defines this backpack is its modular structure. It uses a full MOLLE webbing system across the exterior, allowing users to attach additional pouches, gear, or accessories depending on their loadout. Internally, it is divided into multiple compartments designed for organized access rather than random storage. That means flashlights, multi-tools, first aid kits, communication devices, and other EDC essentials can all be assigned dedicated locations, reducing confusion and improving retrieval speed when it matters most. One of the strongest advantages of the Rush 24 2.0 is its balance between capacity and control. Even though it is a full-size tactical backpack, it is designed to distribute weight evenly across the shoulders and back, which reduces fatigue during extended wear. The reinforced shoulder straps and padded back panel improve comfort while maintaining structural rigidity. That combination makes it suitable not only for outdoor environments, but also for urban carry, travel, and emergency preparedness setups. Another key strength is durability under real-world stress. 5.11. Tactical is known for building gear that is used in professional environments, and this backpack reflects that philosophy. The stitching is reinforced at high stress points, the zippers are heavy-duty and weather-resistant, and the fabric is designed to resist tearing even under repeated loading and unloading cycles. In practical terms, yes, this means it is built to survive years of consistent use rather than casual occasional carry. However, the trade-offs come down to size and intent. This is not a minimalist EDC item, and it is not designed for lightweight daily carry scenarios where only a few tools are needed. It naturally encourages users to expand their loadout, which can lead to overpacking if not managed properly. It is also more noticeable in everyday environments compared to smaller sling bags or compact organizers, which means it requires a certain level of commitment to tactical or preparedness-oriented carry philosophy. There is also the consideration of necessity versus capability. While the backpack can hold a large amount of gear, its effectiveness ultimately depends on what the user chooses to store inside it. Without a well-thought-out loadout, it becomes simply a durable empty carrier rather than a functional system. That means its real value is unlocked through planning, not just ownership. Still, in the context of this Amazon EDC lineup, the 5.11 Rush 24 2.0 earns its #1 position because it represents the foundation of everything else. It is not a tool you use in isolation, but a system that organizes, protects, and enables every other item in your setup to function at its full potential. So when this list reaches its final enter, at the end of the day, comparing Temu and Amazon in the EDC self-defense space isn't really about deciding which one is universally better, because both platforms serve very different purposes depending on where you are in your preparedness journey. Temu gives you speed, variety, and low-risk experimentation, while Amazon gives you stability, tested performance, and a stronger sense of long-term trust when you actually depend on the gear you choose. And once you understand that difference, the real takeaway becomes clear. Building an effective EDC setup isn't about choosing a platform, it's about choosing a mindset. One side helps you explore what's possible, the other helps you refine what actually works. And the best setups usually come from knowing how to balance both in a way that fits your own real-world needs.